Hi everyone, this is Veda from Zephyr Lake Carmelite Mission. Today is the feast of Saint Simon Stock, to whom the devotion to the scapular was revealed by Our Lady in a vision. And we know that we also celebrated a couple days ago the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. You can see the statue of Our Lady behind me. So happy feast of Saint Simon Stock, and also happy feast of Our Lady of Fatima, even though belated. In continuing my series on St. John of the Cross's Ascent of Mount Carmel, today we are going to be reviewing chapters 25 through 28 from Book 2. And in my last video, we spoke about the visions, and actually we spoke about the types of visions, corporeal and incorporeal visions that people can have. And visions are one of the spiritual apprehensions that the people have and experience as they grow deeper and deeper in prayer. In this chapter 25, we are going to speak of the second kind of spiritual apprehension, which is the revelations. So revelations are also sometimes called as the spirit of prophecy, and there are different kinds and different nature of the revelations that people experience. Sometimes the revelations disclose some hidden truths or some manifestation of a secret or a mystery. And then God imparts understanding of this particular truth to the intellect directly and discloses something that God is doing either in the person's individual life or in the world that, for the salvation of all of us, and or something that he already did or he's going to do in the future. So it is past, present, and future. It could be any of those three. And there are two types of revelations, St. John of the Cross says. The first one is the disclosure of truths to the intellect, which is knowledge, giving knowledge about something. The second is the manifestation of secrets and hidden mysteries. And in chapter 26, we see the two kinds of knowledge of naked truths. The proper conduct of the soul, like how do we deal if we are given this knowledge of some truth? How are we supposed to conduct ourselves with regard to these revelations? So this is very unlike intellectual visions. He says this is an intellectual understanding, so it's not like you're seeing something, but rather you're understanding some truth about God. And the visions of truths are also about God. Or it is a vision of something that is happening in the present, or some event that happened in the past, or something that is about to happen in the future. Now, this resembles the spirit of prophecy, and he will speak more about this in the coming paragraphs. So knowledge of naked truths is of two kinds. One can be about God himself, and again he uses much of the scripture to substantiate this two kinds. Especially he quotes from the Old Testament, Psalms and Exodus, and also from 2 Corinthians. And when you read, you can read all those passages. So in the first kind of the naked truths or the knowledge of truths is about the Creator. So God is the focal focus, he's the direct object of this knowledge. It's either about his omnipotence, his fortitude, his goodness, his sweetness, all those qualities and attributes that we reflect on, and we receive a particular deep knowledge directly to our intellect about those particular truths. That's one kind of the revelation. The other one is about a creature. It could be about people. And he says, one cannot express in particular terms this knowledge. So the person experienced this might have this sublime knowledge, but it is received only by that one person who has arrived at the union with God. So he's become so close to God, and he receives it in a very natural, in a subtle way. It's tangible and real to the person, but it's very difficult for the person to express this knowledge to others in particular terms. Now again here, the devil can try to present something counterfeit, but it will not have the sensible effect on the soul. The soul that is desiring and seeking to union with God will be protected from the ill effects. God produces an effect that enters the soul and fills it with love. God fills the soul with virtues, blessings, and he eradicates all the imperfections in the soul. The sweetness would compensate for all the trials suffered in life, even though innumerable. Individuals become so courageous, so resolved to suffer many things for Christ, that they find it a special suffering to observe that they do not suffer. This sublime knowledge is not naturally attainable through our own human efforts, and we cannot just imagine it on our own. It is an effect that God produces directly on the soul and is not acquirable through human effort. God's divine touch occurs when the soul is least expecting or least not even thinking of them. They may even cause the body to tremble sometimes. At other times, it may just be an interior experience where the soul is completely tranquil. There's a tranquility of spirit that the person experiences as they are given this supernatural knowledge about our Creator. It may occur on the hearing of a word, or somebody might say one word or read one passage from the sacred scripture, or even from some other spiritual book or some other source, and that could cause this great knowledge to be imparted to the soul, a light that God illumines in the soul, and it intensifies the person towards God. So there is this greater desire for God, and there is a greater virtue that is experienced by the person, and it intensifies the divine touch of God in the soul, and its efficacy and force are felt, and it is to various degrees depending on the person, and also the same person may experience at different times in varying degree the efficacy and the force of these revelations. And since these occur suddenly without the exercise of free will, one need not be concerned about either desiring it or not desiring, because if it happens, the effect will also happen at the same time. So all we need to do is to be humble and to be resigned and to just focus on prayer and to be one with God. Since this is an aspect of the union of the soul with God, which is the goal and the direction that we are focused in, we do not need to reject it. And individuals who receive this are usually very humble, suffering souls that are pursuing great detachment and who are in great love with God. God imparts this to the person who truly loves Him with a pure heart and who has actually reached Him. Detachment is the way to union of the soul with God. Then he talks about the second kind of knowledge of the naked truth, which is about the creature. And this one is a bit inferior to the first kind, which is fully, completely centered and focused only on God, his attributes, and the knowledge of God. However, this is about some human deeds or some human events, and without anyone informing or telling that person, this individual knows of some either events that happened in the past or happening in the present or in the future. So this is about creatures and created things, so it is definitely inferior. And individuals must assent to reason, to instructions and commands of their spiritual director, even if it is extremely contrary to what they feel. So in this, we have to exercise much caution. The particular knowledge that God infuses supernaturally in souls when he desires is different than the general habit of knowledge like Solomon had, because he had asked God for wisdom. God had given him the gift of wisdom. So that's more of a general, it's a habit, but it's a gift distributed by God, whereas there is a supernatural particular knowledge that God infuses into the soul, which is, it differs. Those are two different things. Those who are close to reaching perfection possess light and knowledge about events happening in their presence or absence. So there may be things occurring very far away, but it's possible that the person is given light and knowledge about those events that are happening. This knowledge derives from their illumined and purified spirits. Especially the gift of prudence should be used for this when we experience such infused knowledge, light about present events. Individuals whose spirit is purified can naturally perceive the inclinations and talents of other persons and what lies in their heart or interior spirit. They derive this knowledge through exterior inclinations. Again, here the devil has this skill because he is also a spirit. So does the spiritual person, because the spiritual persons, through supernatural enlightenment or through exterior indications, they are able to intuitively know the thoughts of others or their interior state. They are more sensitive to be able to make those observations. They cannot know this naturally, so that's different than the revelations. So the revelations are something that God himself gives. But even without revelations, sometimes we can try to know things naturally, but we have to be very careful because this naturally gained knowledge can sometimes be, or the intuition can sometimes be wrong. We can come to wrong conclusion. So, or we can get tricked into believing something or reading into something that is not true. So one must not trust this knowledge, so the devil cannot meddle in this area. So any of this kind of knowledge that we gain about either a person's heart or their interior spirit or whether they're a spiritual person or not, we should not try to do that. We should renounce such knowledge and we should reject such things. So spiritual persons can have knowledge of human deeds and events even when they are not present. So we know this from the Bible. Many of the prophets experienced this, that even though they were not physically present, they were aware of events that happened far away from them. These kinds of knowledge of things, some comes to the soul passively, while the person is either inattentive or distracted, and it is expressed in a language unknown to them, and it is given to, they're given this knowledge, and the meaning is revealed to them without the need for words, without the need for them to know the language. They are able to understand. So the understanding is given without the actual language or words. Now the devil can also do such things in a deceptive way, obviously. The soul must dismiss and discard these thoughts and pray for strength. They should be prayerful and pray for God's strength to be able to not fall into the deceptions that could also happen. So the devil presents as an example the sins of others falsely to make the soul calumniate against that person. The devil imparts zeal to these persons to publish and broadcast others' faults, seeking for prayer as an example, saying, please pray for this person, they're going down the wrong path. But it can be a deception. So we have to be careful to reject these kinds of knowledge. Whereas the devil causes calumny, sin, and distress, God will cause these, through his knowledge, the supernatural knowledge that passively comes to the soul from God, will cause a person to quietly pray for these people without broadcasting or publishing other people's faults to the whole world. Instead, the person, prays for them silently, or they may even be able to correct and provide a remedy for those persons, but in a private way. God shows the holy souls the faults of others so that we may pray for them quietly and to provide the remedy to help the soul that is in need of correction. And whereas the devil just causes sin and distress. Now, this knowledge will become an obstacle to the person if the person becomes too attached to these kind of passive knowledge that comes to the soul, thinking that they are somehow, holier than the others. It can cause serious error and sin. So the person must desire to journey to God by the unknowing and depending only on faith alone and accepting the graces that God gives. So the effect God desires to produce through these passive communications will be fixed in the soul without need for efforts of its own. And then there is the false knowledge and true knowledge. False knowledge will cause evil effects, and true knowledge or good knowledge will always cause good effects. But still, we should reject all of this knowledge and be careful not to fall into error. The best thing to do is to just be resigned to the effects God produces in our soul and stay in faith, journeying towards God and praying for whatever situations or events, whatever knowledge we receive, just keeping that all in our prayer. And the second kind of revelation St. John of the Cross speaks of are secrets and hidden mysteries. Sometimes God reveals these secrets and hidden mysteries, and he does this in various ways. The ways in which this knowledge is given can be either a hindrance or it can be a contribution towards the union with God. It can go in either ways. So we have to be very, very cautious with these secrets and hidden mysteries that God may reveal to us. So first one was the knowledge of the truths, the naked truths, and then the second kind of revelation is the disclosure of secrets and hidden mysteries. Now, again here, the devil can greatly deceive souls in this matter too. And then St. John of the Cross talks of the two subtypes of this second kind of revelation. The first one is concerning God himself. Example, the mystery of the Holy Trinity. Some saints might have this sudden understanding. They may not be able to express it to others, but they have this sudden understanding about something concerning God. And the second is concerning God in his works. Example, like the articles of our Catholic faith, the propositions of truths, revelatory prophecies, promises, or some kind of like a threat or chastisement from God, past or future events in this matter of faith, or something about the universe, about the kingdoms, provinces, states, families, and individuals. All these things could happen too. About God and his works and about God himself are the two subtypes of the secrets and hidden mysteries that a soul could, that God might give to a soul, revelation that God might give to a soul. So these occur in words, signs, figures, images, likeness, etc. Example is the apocalypse of St. John. So there's a lot of symbolism in what St. John sees. And this revelation occurs even now to some people. Example, the number of days like a person still has to live, or like the trials they will endure. You know, God sometimes allows a person to know in advance something particular that will happen to that person, to the country they're living in, or something like that. And manifestation of already declared truths and mysteries of our faith could also happen. So again, here the devil can meddle easily, because when these revelations are not entirely in the spirit, but has something to do with this world and the things of this world, events of this world, he can easily meddle. If there's any variation from already established church teaching, we must not give assent to it. Even if we feel like this is a crystal clear revelation or whatever, our submission to the teachings of the church should come first. Because there are no more articles of faith to be revealed. We only rely and believe in the doctrines as taught by the church and in the faith that has been passed down to us through the generations by the magisterium. So we pass through the night of intellect to divine light of union. And the way we do that is by relying on the merit of faith and to conserve and pursue the purity of heart and mind and faith. St. John of the Cross says, it is impossible to go undeceived if you rely too much on these revelations, unless a person genuinely strives to reject these revelations about the propositions of faith. Because if we reject it, then the devil will not be able to mix facts with falsehoods to deceive and to deceive our mind, because he can do that, and that will become a greater influence on our imagination and senses. Because the devil can easily convince us that we know better than the doctrines of the church, and can make the soul very attached to them, tenacious about them. So the best course of action is to remain pure, cautious, humble, and we should resist and reject all of these revelations and visions with as much effort and care as it would be extremely dangerous. It will be an extremely dangerous temptation and will be a hindrance for us to reach the union of love. And I know this is a lot of repetition, but it is in chapter 27 of book 2 that he says individuals should be on their guard against these revelations, so that through the night of faith they may journey to union purely and without error. And as I said earlier in the earlier videos, it's important that we journey in pure faith and not rely on all these revelations, and because I think as we hear it repeated, we can actually internalize it and live it. It's not just about hearing or reading, but it's about living that, what we read and hear. The final chapter for today, St. John of the Cross talks about the nature and kinds of supernatural locutions. Locutions is the third of the supernatural apprehensions. We saw there were 4 of them that St. John of the Cross speaks of. The vision we saw in the last video, revelation we just finished, And then in chapter 28, he just introduces the third spiritual apprehension, which is locution. And the last one we will see in the next video would be spiritual senses, that is feelings. So in chapter 28, St. John of the Cross says about the supernatural locutions, the kinds and nature of supernatural locutions received by the Spirit. St. John of the Cross's book is basically a guide for the soul in purity of faith through all its natural and supernatural apprehensions, so that in freedom from deception and freedom from every obstacle, the soul is able to journey towards the divine union with God. So that's the goal of St. John of the Cross. It's a guide for the soul. So first he speaks of the supernatural locutions. They're produced as in a person's spirit without the use of any of the bodily senses. And he says there are three classes of supernatural locutions. The first is successive, the second is formal, and the third is substantial locutions. And with the definition of those three, I will end today's video. The first is successive locutions are the words and reasonings that the Spirit itself usually forms and deduces while recollected. So successive locutions are the words and reasonings that the Spirit itself usually forms and deduces while the person is recollected. The second is the formal locutions. Formal locutions are certain distinct and formal words that the Spirit receives, whether or not recollected, not from within itself, but from outside of itself, from another. So that is a formal locution. And the third one is a substantial locution. Substantial locutions are words that are produced formally in the Spirit, regardless of whether one is recollected, and that cause in the substance of the soul, the power and very substance they signify. So not only are they hearing or receiving those words, but it has a substantive effect on the soul, and it is significant. So the effect, so that's why it's called substantial locutions. So with that, we will discuss more of this in the next video in detail, each of these three kinds of locutions. So thank you for watching. Have a blessed day. And again, happy feast of Saint Simon Stock today. And happy feast of Our Lady of Fatima belated. God bless.